LBC Late Nights with Clive Bull. And it's calls on the topic of your choice, whatever you'd like to talk about. We're talking politics now, and Jeffrey Goodman's with us to fill us in on what's been happening at the Labour conference in Blackpool today. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hello, Clive.
Of course, big day was yesterday, really. Was it all a bit of a come down?
It was a bit. Yeah? Very much the anticlimax now. Very much the afterglow after this tremendous performance by Blair on Tuesday. And everyone really, frankly, had now almost concluded that the conference is over. It's not fair, because it isn't over. There's quite a lot of interesting stuff being debated today, and will be tomorrow. For example, education, pensions, whole welfare state, transport policy. So there's quite a lot of beat in the conference today. But, I mean, frankly, what Tony Blair did yesterday has overwhelmed the delegates, and they're still sort of shuffling around, muttering and talking about it.
Do you think there's a danger, though, that they get all sort of swept up with the fever being there? Because my impression, the feedback I've had from the listeners so far is, well, yes, probably it was quite a good speech, but really we're not impressed these days by any politician's promises.
Well, I think that's right, Clive, and I think part of the great merit of Blair is that he recognises that. He recognises that throughout the country there's a tremendous sort of feeling of scepticism, if not downright cynicism and cynical attitude toward all politicians now, whatever party, whatever they say, whatever promises. He's aware of that, and I think this is part of the script, really, of the Blair, what I would call the Blair script, the evangelical sort of tone of his speech yesterday, knowing that there is this increasing divide between the voters and the people at the House of Commons in Westminster. That he is aware of that helps him in a way to try and bridge this gap and say to people, now look, I know exactly what you think about us politicians. You probably think we're all a lot of rogues. Isn't quite true. You know, we are trying to do our best. This is the kind of moral crusade that he is now trying to launch.
I certainly get the feeling from doing phone-ins over the years, say 10 years ago,
yes.
When we'd be discussing something like this, there would be quite a lot of fierce political debate, and from one party's point of view or the other.
Yes.
The predominant call that I get now is not so much supporting one or other party, but just being fed up with the lot of them. And I really do think that there's been a massive change in public opinion.
Oh, I think that is true. I think absolutely incontrovertible, that. And part of the reason for this, I think, is what I call the post-Thatcher trauma. I mean, during those Thatcher years of the 80s, I mean, whatever you thought of her policy, she was an extraordinary woman, very much a politician of conviction. She did things, she banged the drum, she had people who hated her, and she had people who loved her. She polarised opinion. And then, in a sense, after Thatcher went and John Major came, there's been a sort of great sort of letdown. Nobody really sort of takes much notice of politicians now, and there's also, of course, the sleaze factor, as I think come into it very powerfully, still is running, as we know, very strongly. I think this has confirmed a lot of, particularly younger voters, and maybe some of the older ones too, but certainly younger voters, into believing that politicians are in down there at Westminster in for what they can get out of it, and there's a lot of money going into their pockets in packets of banknotes and all that. And certainly the sleeve stories that we've been witnessing in the last few days, not to talk about going back a bit, I think has confirmed a lot of doubts about the whole role of politicians. And I think this is true. In many ways, I think the voters are now beginning to look at politicians rather as the American voters have looked at politicians for generations.
Well, who were the good performers today, then?
Well, I think the good performance certainly was David Blunkett on education. Very moving speech, really. After all, we have to remember that he is an extraordinary chap, blind, totally blind, been blind from birth. Has fought his way from very, very poor circumstances in his hometown of Sheffield through to university, and here he is now as Shadow Education Secretary, hopes to be Education Minister.
Has there ever been a blind minister?
No, not a blind cabinet minister, certainly no. And this is an extraordinary situation. Difficult sometimes, I mean, with the best will in the world, to know how he will be able to cope with some of the problems he'll face in government. If there is a Labour government, because it's not just a question of sitting around the cabinet table and sitting with the civil servants. He's got also to face, or he will have to face, as Education Secretary, across the floor of the House of Commons. And one can imagine, if one can possibly imagine what it was like to be totally blind in those circumstances, what an extraordinary situation it will be.
Yeah, and of course he has his dog that goes everywhere.
His lovely black Labrador, amusingly, during David Blunkett's speech, was seen yawning.
Oh dear.
And at the end of Blunkett's speech, when he got a standing ovation, it really was quite a moving occasion, this lovely great black Labrador let out a great big yawn again.
Does he read his speech from Braille, then?
He reads his speech from Braille. He obviously practices it a lot. He rehearses it a great deal in his hotel room. And when he stands up at that rostrum, you can see his hand flickering over the Braille, yes.
And, of course, they've also got this weird kind of video screen thing there, which I don't think I've seen at a conference before. Has that worked?
Well, it's certainly novel for a Labour Party conference. The Conservative Party conference, which is always so well organised, extremely well orchestrated. By tradition, the Conservative Party conference has that reputation. This is the first time we've seen this kind of video screen at a Labour conference, and it's been extensively used right from the word go on Monday. with Robin Cook and Gordon Brown and David Bunkett and John Prescott today. John Prescott was he was almost like playing the organ every now and again. Prescott, after making a few wisecracks, he pressed a button and something else came on the screen. That was all about the razzmatazz, really. It was all about the building of the Labour Party membership. They've got a huge record recruitment in the last couple of years. Of over 300,000, and naturally John Prescott was banging the big drum on this.
Well, the big thing that attracted all the attention was Barbara Castle in her, I think it's the 86th year.
That's right, she's going up to 86.
Going on about pensions, and with some justification, fighting that particular corner.
As the argument goes in the conference hall tonight, she may have lost the vote, but my God, she won the hearts, if not the argument, on the issue of pensions. What she wants, you see, is going back to the time when she was Secretary of State dealing with pensions, when she introduced pension entitlement, which was the annual increase being geared to the annual increase in average earnings, and also occupational pensions, which she also helped to introduce during the previous Labour government. She wants those restored. And Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, of course, coming out with the same old tune. Well, we're not going to commit ourselves to anything, certainly not on detail of taxation, until we get into power and we see what the books are like. She wasn't having any of that. She thundered on. Extraordinary seeing there. This wonderful Red Queen in the scarlet costume. A wonderful sort of piece of, conference theatre. Superb.
She gave a stunning performance then.
It really was a stunning performance.
But not too embarrassing for Tony Blair and his...
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is, I mean, yes, to some extent, of course, it's embarrassing to have a woman of her stature, old Labour, Baroness Castle, as she's called, ridiculing the leadership. But it was quite actually clever afterwards. What happened was not only did she get a standing ovation before she started to speak, and she got one when she finished, and the whole of the platform rose then, led by Tony Blair, who, he almost came over and kissed her, really. It was, I suppose you could say, a very clever piece of conference orchestration.
Yet again, yeah.
Yet again, and the other interesting thing is when she had to be helped down from the rostrum, and who was the man who helped her to slide comfortably into her seat? None other than Tony Blair's guru, Peter Mandelson.
Oh, well, gosh. Mind you, I've noticed him hovering around, sort of clinging onto people's arms and then letting them go at the right moment.
Yes, well, that's...
with Mrs. Blair, for example.
Political clublands technique.
Yes, so that they move in just at the right moment for the cameras and all the rest of it.
That's right, yes.
Now, we had a call last night on the subject of pensions saying, wasn't it Barbara Castle who, 20 years ago, actually cancelled the pensioners' Christmas bonus of £10? Now, how does that stand with her now campaigning on behalf of pensioners? Does that ring any bells with you?
Well, it certainly rings a bell, and it's quite true, of course, because that was the time of the great economic crisis, and the Labour cabinet, I mean, actually Barbara Castle fought against it. She opposed it inside cabinet, but she was defeated.
So she was defeated, but she was the person who effectively had to put it through.
She was the person responsible. She had to carry out the dirty deed, so to speak. But of course, I mean, that was because the Callaghan government by then had run into such a serious economic crisis. You'll remember the problem of when the IMF came down very strongly on Dennis Healey, who was then Chancellor, and there were tremendous cuts right across the whole social services and the welfare state in the late 70s. And Barbara Castle, of course, had to bite the bullet and do the dirty deed. Although, as I say, she, in cabinet, had opposed it.
Good, right. Well, I knew you'd be the man to clear that one up for us. Geoffrey, thanks very much indeed. We will talk to you again later in the week. More to look forward to at the conference?
More to look forward to, yes. I mean, we have Jack Straw, the Shadow Home Secretary, who's going to be talking about crime, using the famous Tony Blair slogan, we're going to be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. So we'll hear Jack Straw on about that tomorrow. And
you haven't seen our boss around, have you, Mr. Golding? He should be there by now.
No, I haven't seen him.
Perhaps they got lost. They did go to Blackpool and not Brighton, didn't they?
Well,
oh dear.
Who knows? They may have ended up in Leeds or Blackburn.
Well, if you see a guy very smart with a bow tie, just give him a wave and tell him that we're trying to get hold of him.
That'll be Charles.
Yeah.
I will certainly do that, Clive.
LBC is back, new for 96. How are we doing so far? Tell us the things we're great at and where we need to get better. The LBC 1152 listener line 0541 52 1152. Call us and tell us what you think. LBC 1152. We listen to you because you listen to us.
Quiet now, settle down at the back. Now, Mrs. Stratton, how are you going to choose the right independent school for Caroline?
I don't know, sir.
And Mr. Burnham, will it be day school or boarding school for young Jeremy?
I'm not sure, sir.
It seems to me that more homework is needed. I suggest you visit Independent Schools 96 between the 4th and 6th of October at Olympia. Day schools, boarding schools, nursery schools, prep schools, senior schools, they'll all be there. For more information, call 0171 571 6603. It's an education, and it's free.
Complete news and information for London. 11:52 a.m. This is LBC.
It's
Past midnight, I'm Joanna Gosling. Mandy Allwood, the woman who was pregnant with 8 babies, has now lost all of them. She's said to be devastated. She miscarried the last of the 6 boys and 2 girls this afternoon. She's been criticised for selling her story and ignoring medical advice to selectively abort some of the fetuses. But her publicity agent, Max Clifford, says Mandy has...